When my grandfather bought this land in 1957, he told my father, "A man's boundary is where he stops letting others walk over him." For decades, our family's small patch of paradise, a 5-acre property hugging the quiet waters of Maple Hollow Lake, stood as proof of that principle. We built our cabin, mowed our lawns, and watched the seasons roll across the mirrored water. No one questioned where our property began or ended. That is, until the newcomers arrived. It started innocently enough, an SUV full of enthusiasm and noise pulling up to the old Miller Place across the cove. The Crawfords, a family from the city, decided that our sleepy lakeside was the perfect place for their weekend escapes. They were friendly at first. We exchanged pies, greetings, and polite smiles. But friendliness has a way of curdling when boundaries are involved. About 2 months after they settled in, I noticed their kids swimming awfully close to my dock. Then came the paddle boat, bright yellow and annoyingly cheerful, tethered right up to my side of the lake. One evening, as the sun bled orange across the water, Mr. Crawford waved and shouted, "We love how open this lake is. It's great that it's community property." I froze mid-step on my dock. "Community property?" I repeated. "Yeah," he said, still smiling. "The realtor told us the lake's shared by all adjoining owners. No one really owns it." I laughed. "Not the polite kind. The dry, dangerous kind that tastes like iron. My family had the original deed, complete with the old county map showing the lake as part of our parcel. Private land. No ambiguity." The Crawfords had bought a lie, or worse, they were choosing to believe one. That night, I dug through my father's old filing cabinet. Dust rose like spirits from the past. There it was, the survey, the deed, the tax receipts, all naming me, and before me, my father. And before him, my grandfather, as the rightful owners of the entire lake. Every inch of shoreline, every drop of water, legally and undeniably ours. But the Crawfords didn't stop. They built a larger dock, extended it into my water, and started hosting loud community barbecues. When I approached them with documents in hand, they smiled that smug, city-bred smile. "We'll let the county decide," Mrs. Crawford said, her tone dripping with the confidence of someone who's never lost a fight. That's when I decided, if they wanted a boundary, I'd give them one they'd never forget. It took me a week to plan. I didn't sleep much, just lay awake listening to the frogs croak and the wind whisper against the windows. I measured, calculated, and imagined their faces when they saw what I was about to do. On a fog-heavy Monday morning, I drove my truck to the hardware store and bought 50 yards of steel fencing, concrete posts, and barbed wire. The clerk gave me a strange look when I told him I was building a fence through a lake. "Never seen anyone do that before," he said. "That's the point," I replied. By Tuesday evening, the posts were standing like soldiers along the shoreline. The water lapped against the fresh metal, rippling with each hammer strike. I didn't stop at the edge, I walked straight into the lake, boots sinking into the mud, and continued planting each post along the exact property line shown on the old survey, right through their floating dock. When I reached their side, I could see Mrs. Crawford standing on her deck, arms crossed, coffee mug trembling slightly. "You can't do that," she yelled. "Sure I can," I said. "Private property." By the time the sun went down, a shiny silver fence cut the lake in two like a scar. It sliced directly through their dock, separating their paddle boat from its mooring and leaving their floating platform useless. I stepped back onto dry land, soaked to the knees, proud and furious all at once. The next morning, they called the sheriff. By noon, he was standing beside me, boots muddy, reading my deed with a squint. "Technically," he said, "you're within your rights. It's your land, and your water." Mr. Crawford fumed, face red as his kayak. "This is ridiculous. We're neighbors." "Then act like it," I said. Word spread fast around Maple Hollow. Some folks called me petty, others called me a hero. But as I watched that silver line glint in the sunlight, dividing the lake like a mirror cracked down the middle, I felt something deeper than satisfaction. I felt my grandfather's words echo again. A man's boundary is where he stops letting others walk over him. And I had stopped. Completely. The Crawfords didn't take my fence lightly. They called the county assessor, the environmental board, and even tried to bring in a TV news crew from the nearest city. By Friday, a reporter in a blue jacket was standing on their side of the lake, pointing at the fence like it was the Berlin Wall. A local landowner has divided a lake in two, citing private property rights, she said. But neighbors argue it's a case of selfishness gone too far. I stood on my porch, arms crossed, watching from a distance. I didn't say a word. My documents were in order. The truth was solid. Let them talk. The Crawfords started gathering signatures from other homeowners around the lake, people who barely knew me, to petition for fairness. They wanted the county to declare the lake a public resource. They used words like togetherness and community spirit. Nice sounding lies. No one mentioned that I paid the taxes on the lake every single year, or that I'd been cleaning the shoreline for decades while others ignored it. Soon, the fence became a spectacle. Locals drove by to gawk, some even taking selfies with it. Kids whispered that Old Man Turner, that's me, was crazy enough to fence water. My niece thought the whole thing was hilarious and printed T-shirts that read "Keep out, even the fish know better." But behind the humor, tension simmered. One night I found the barbed wire clipped clean in two places. Someone had taken bolt cutters to my work. I patched it up before sunrise, reinforced it with heavier gauge wire, and installed a motion light that could blind a deer. The next morning, the Crawfords acted innocent, sipping their coffee like nothing happened. Weeks passed, and lawyers' letters began to arrive, heavy envelopes full of threats. Cease and desist. Potential damages. Illegal obstruction of a shared waterway. I laughed at each one, mailed back copies of my deed, and highlighted the line reading, including the body of water known as Maple Hollow Lake, entirety. Still, I could feel the war thickening. When I walked into the local store, people whispered. When I passed the Crawfords' driveway, they glared. I wasn't just the man with the fence anymore, I was the villain of the lake. But villains don't lose sleep when they're right. The day I received the court summons, I didn't panic. I put on my best flannel, tucked the deed under my arm, and whispered to the water, they started this. I'm just defending what's mine. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe the fence wasn't dividing just the lake, but the town itself. Courtrooms are colder than lakes, but they have the same stillness before something breaks. The Crawfords sat across the aisle from me, polished and indignant. Their lawyer a slick man in a gray suit who smiled too easily. My own attorney was an old friend of my father's, slow, steady, and unshakable. The county judge, a woman with sharp eyes and a voice that could cut stone, called the case. Turner versus Crawford. Property dispute over Maple Hollow Lake. She looked at me. Mr. Turner, you built a fence through the middle of a dock. Yes, ma'am, I said. On my land. The courtroom snickered. The Crawfords' lawyer presented maps, photos, and an argument about the spirit of shared natural resources. My lawyer countered with documents older than anyone in the room. The deed, the tax records, the survey. The judge examined them one by one. Hours passed like decades. Then she leaned back, exhaled, and said the words that would echo across the lake forever, legally speaking. Mr. Turner owns the entirety of Maple Hollow Lake. His fence, while unconventional, stands within his rights. The Crawfords looked like their air had been sucked away. Mrs. Crawford's face twisted with disbelief. But this isn't fair. Fairness, the judge said, is not always the same as legality. When I walked out of the courthouse, the sky was clear, the air crisp. Reporters shouted questions, but I kept walking. Back at the lake, the fence shimmered in the afternoon sun. Solid and unapologetic. Weeks later, the Crawfords' for sale sign went up. The laughter and music that once spilled from their dock vanished. The lake returned to silence, mine again. Sometimes I sit at the edge of the fence and watch the reflection of that silver line slicing across the water. It's ugly, maybe, but it's honest. My neighbors still whisper. Some call me stubborn, others say I'm a legend. But I know the truth, I didn't build that fence out of anger. I built it because lines matter. Because ownership matters. Because when people forget that, chaos seeps in like water through a cracked board. And every time the wind rattles that fence and the metal hums softly over the water, it reminds me of one simple truth. Sometimes peace requires a boundary you can't swim across.